Welcome to the Doug and Mike Show. I'm Doug.
And I am Mike.
And we have real conversations with real people. Mike, who is our special guest today?
All right, we have the privilege and I think some good luck, too, to have wrangled and gotten the schedule just right to have our 12th District Vice President from the International Association of Firefighters, Walt Dix, is joining us. Thanks for coming on.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I've enjoyed, Doug and I have been at this for a few years now, a couple years, maybe not a few. I think I'm stretching the truth, maybe just a couple years. And we've had some great folks on, some local firefighters and different kind of leaders in different genres, not just the fire service. And, we're excited to be a part of your election to the district vice president position just a few years ago. And, we wanted to give you a second to get your feet wet and get tuned in and dialed in before we came and had you on the show. But we felt like now's a good time. Everybody's, as we record this, we're all quarantined and kind of doing the COVID thing. So everybody's home and able to get on Zoom and record these meetings and things. So it's a great opportunity to have you on. And, I want to start, let's go back, just kind of break the ice here. It's Walt Dix's first day on the job, first day on the fire truck. He's got his fire gear out there. He's nervous as a long-tailed cat. And number one, where is Walt Dix when he puts that fire gear next to his truck? And what was that first call, that first shift like for you?
Well, I started out at Ocean Fire District 14 down in Broward County back in 1978. We did not have a county fire department. We had 14 independent fire districts. And so each of those fire districts started getting money, and they were able to hire firefighters to supplement the volunteers. The volunteer workforce was dwindling. And so every fire station hired one or two firefighters and then began to grow. And so my first day on the job was in Lauderdale by the Sea at Ocean Fire District 14 on the beach on A1A. The sun was shining. It was May. And it was a fire alarm that I ran on a high-rise building. And it's interesting when you ride the truck by yourself because I was a volunteer prior to that, so I knew a little bit about the job. And as the first paid firefighter there, we had to get the truck to the scene and get set up and hope that volunteers showed up. And so it was interesting rolling on a 16-story high-rise building with a fire alarm going off all by yourself, not really sure who's going to show up and what you're going to do.
Wow.
But we got through it. It was interesting.
That's fun.
That's kind of crazy because you're driving by yourself, so it's not even like, was there a chief officer en route? How did they work that?
Well, they had a part-time volunteer, part-paid fire chief who was there Monday to Friday, who would show up. Never knew when they were going to show up. We had a very, unique district with high-rise buildings, residential, commercial, and the volunteers would come from all over. And as you know, back in the 70s, volunteers were pretty prevalent, but then when you get into the 80s, they almost disappeared. So wow. You've got to kind of do it all. You've got to get your equipment ready. You've got to do a size up. You got to talk on the radio. One-man band.
One-man band. That's what I was thinking about. Exactly. So when you got into the fire service, Walt, were you the first in the family, or did you have other family members that were also in the line of duty?
No, I'm the first firefighter. My dad was in the military and then went into construction as a structural engineer. And my mom was a nurse growing up and then, stay-at-home mom taking care of the family. So it was not my initial thought. If I look back, I was going to college to be an architect. And I don't know what happened, but I just, talked to a friend and said, hey, why don't you try this thing out here and volunteer for a little bit?
Sure. I could see art. I could see architect. I could see Walt, the architect, the creative. I see that creative side there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It was interesting. It was interesting study. But then, the spark kind of got to me, riding the truck, doing some training drills as a volunteer. And within 6 months of doing that, they said, hey, we're going to hire some people. What do you think? Are you interested? Do you want to compete for the job? So I had to compete against 2 other people for the job. And fortunately, I got the job, and here I am today. It was great.
Walt, so interesting start of the career, but I know there wasn't a union then. So where did the union background come from?
So a year after I got hired, all the fire districts hired firefighters at the same time. So these 14 fire districts, all in total, hired 32 firefighters, spread out amongst the different fire districts, depending on how busy they were or how many stations they had. And we all started to communicate. There was a fire board in Broward County that oversaw all of the fire districts. And being as we all got hired at the same time, we were able to communicate with each other. We were all getting paid from the county, so there was a way for us to communicate. We decided that organizing was something that was necessary because we had gotten message that all the fire districts were going to merge together. And that was going to happen in 1980 or 81. And so we all felt it was very important to be IAFF and be represented as a group. And so we organized the union in 79. I was one of the charter members, and we just kind of launched everything knowing that we were better off as a union having a seat at the table when they started talking about a merger than we would have been individually as 14 different districts.
And what was that like? Was that, I would imagine that would have been, what the temperature was in that area. But I mean, I'm sure you experienced a bunch of pushback, right, from management?
No, actually we didn't. We had a pretty strong labor-friendly county here. Mm-hmm. They had a very strong AFL-CIO. We had some very old unions here, Fort Lauderdale, Hollywood, Pompano, very well-established old unions that helped us navigate through the process. We also went to the Broward County Council where all the unions met on a regular basis, and there was some very, very vocal members from the airport, Port Everglades, and these other locals that brought us under their wing and said, we'll teach you guys how to organize.
Yeah, so it was supportive, the climate there with the existing locals and the kind of the tradition. It's interesting thinking about different places because my mind jumps to here in Northwest Florida with, just with our experience and everything. It's a little bit different. So it's interesting to hear that perspective.
Well, you can also relate to present day, like Bay County. I mean,
sure. Like even fast forward, 40 or 50 years. And it's exactly, Doug, it's the same sentiment, it's the same pushback that, I think as you dig down and you learn more about the history of the labor movement, it's all about location.
Yeah, I think if you look at Broward County's demographics, they've always been the Democratic seat of the state. Very pro-labor, very well organized. They had a civil service board. They had a civil service rules. And so I don't think there was much pushback on unionizing here, with a few exceptions. Like we just organized the city of Plantation recently, and we had a major fight there 20 years ago. So if you look at city by city, I'd say the majority of cities in our area were very pro-labor, very labor-friendly. in comparison to somebody like Plantation.
So with your district, Walt, I mean, covering Georgia, Carolinas, Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, explain to our listeners, because I know in Florida we're just so used to we just take it for granted of like collective bargaining. What's can you give like a side-by-side comparison of like someone in Georgia or South Carolina versus a Florida firefighter? What we take for granted and what real life is for them?
Sure. So collective bargaining in Florida, as you know, was started by some of our bigger fire departments. They promoted it out of Miami, Jacksonville, Tampa. Those particular areas were really the ones stepping up to the plate in the 70s, pushing for collective bargaining. So when you look at it, we've got a long history of it. You go to these other states, North Carolina, still to this day, it's prohibited by law for public sector employees to have collective bargaining.
Wow.
So unless they have good politics, they're not even allowed to enter into a contract or a handshake agreement, nothing. So there's only 2 states right now in the country that are like that, and that's Virginia and North Carolina. And Virginia is about to change. They just flipped over the House, the Senate, the governor's mansion, and I think you may see change coming in Virginia. But North Carolina is still pretty steadfast against collective bargaining. South Carolina does not have a prohibition against collective bargaining, but they have an at-will employee statute. So in essence, everybody is at will at the pleasure of the fire chief. You come and go at the fire chief's pleasure. So we have no collective bargaining agreements in South Carolina. And we have a lot of fear and intimidation on organizing and even talking to your employer about health and safety issues. And when you get down into Georgia, we're making good strides in Georgia. We've got very good success there. So prior to me coming in as the district vice president in Georgia, did not have a lot of activity going on, no collective bargaining agreements. We did a lot of research. We stood up a group where we sat with Georgia firefighters and asked them about unionizing. And our research found out that they actually have collective bargaining by local ordinance. So in Georgia, if your municipality has over 20,000 residents, your city council can pass a resolution enacting collective bargaining, which is actually one step above what Florida has. So imagine the Florida collective bargaining law as it is, and you have to get your collective bargaining agreement completed before the budget is passed by city council or county commission. And if it's not passed, then you're at impasse and you have a magistrate come in and make recommendations, and council has to act on your collective bargaining agreement before they can pass a budget. So in some regards, the cities we've been able to enact collective bargaining to so far have done very well. And we're going to continue to push that in Georgia.
Wow,
so
that's
let
great.
Let me dig a little deeper on North Carolina, though. So I'm baffled. It's like it's like, do they have
prohibited
anything that's written down? Like, I mean, like you just show up to work and it's like, okay, we're not doing this, and it's just, oh well.
Well, that's exactly the way it is, unless they're politically involved. And a number of our larger departments in North Carolina are extremely political involved, and or they have a civil service board that they work through. But they do not have the right to enter into a collective bargaining agreement. So they've got to be very political, and they've got to develop relationships. And that's what we teach a lot in the IAFF is being a good union leader is all about developing and fostering relationships. Because if you don't have those relationships, then you're not going to be successful regardless of what kind of collective bargaining law that you have.
You know, one of the things that Doug and I were excited about having you on, and we have a lot of listeners in the Southeast, a lot of firefighters. And one of the things that we just do a horrible job of telling our historical story of sharing the chapter 1, 2, and 3 of this whole the movement of the IAFF, of the Florida Professional Firefighters, of our local associations. I mean, in every district in the state, we've got charter locals that were some of the very first locals to join the IAFF. So, I mean, what was that like? I mean, help tell that story for us about the early days, some of the initial, great union leaders and some of the very first things that came about that have really carried us to where we're at today.
Well, if you look back in time, and we do parallel some of these other states, because I see some of the same things going on in the Carolinas and in Georgia that we had in Florida. So back when I joined the fire service, and all through, I would say, the 80s, you had to be a member of the Florida State Firemen's Association. And the Florida State Firemen's Association, which still exists today and predominantly represents volunteers, was mandatory. And so it was in our budget that the fire department paid your membership.
Wow.
And that was the political arm that got things done in Tallahassee. They had the voice. They were the political voice. Until the Florida Professional Firefighters, which back then was called the Professional Firefighters of Florida. So they were the PFFF.
Okay.
And along came a gentleman by the name of Bob Carver, along with others from other parts of the state, Gene Naples and others. And they pushed to make the PFFF the voice of firefighters, the voice of professional firefighters over the Florida State Firemen's Association. And eventually, through their hard work, they were able to overtake that voice. And now we've got, 30,000 members in the state of Florida as part of the Florida Professional Firefighters. But it was an interesting challenge there between the volunteers and the professionals, because they feared we were pushing them out of their careers, when in fact we weren't doing that at all. We were looking to improve our wages, hours, and benefits. And it was a natural progression that volunteers just started going to the wayside as people had more professional jobs. They had less time on their hand. They didn't have time to do the volunteer work that you see in rural communities.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'd never even heard much about the Firemen's Association. Like you said, I mean, they're still out there today, though. I've seen material or a website, and here I'm just thinking that that's just some auxiliary group that's never really been at the table. But it sounds like that was kind of the beginning of some of the advocacy work that was happening in Tallahassee.
It was. I mean, they were the voice of firefighters, professional and volunteer, predominantly volunteer all along and still to this day. But back in the day, like I said, I know that in South Florida, you had to belong to that association, and the departments paid for it and required it. And then they kind of turned into more of the Paramedics and the competition and the fire musters and things like that. And the Florida Professional Firefighters started going more in the legislative direction and really becoming the voice of the professional firefighters, and eventually professional firefighters, paramedics, and EMTs.
So now you see huge turnovers and labor leaders and stuff like that. What do you feel can be done to help stabilize that, Walt?
Well, education is very important. I mean, the turnover in labor leaders is the time commitment, I believe, that's required to do the job. In some of the states that we deal with, and even some of the parts of our own state, like we're dealing in Bay County, there's a fear and intimidation factor that if you're a union leader, you're not going to get promoted. And members want to move up the promotional ladder. And I don't blame them for that at all. They are concerned. So we have to break down those barriers. And it goes back to what I said before. We got to develop relationships with our employers so they don't fear the union, so they embrace the union. And I think we've done a very good job at that. We've just got to continue to do a better job at that.
Well, what were some of the things that the big achievements, the big legislative victories? I mean, I came in the fire service at the very end of the 90s, and a lot of things had happened. A lot of protections and provisions and retirement benefits and health and safety initiatives and things were already in place. Those things weren't just always there. What were some of those big wins and victories back early on, through that legislative work that Bob Carver's and all those labor leaders took care of?
Well, I can tell you the first month I was on the job, they reduced my pension by 1/3. And I didn't really know what that meant. But our multiplier in the Florida retirement system back when I was hired was 3%. And within 30 days, it was lowered to 2%. And it took us 14 years to get that back. So that's a major accomplishment of the Florida professional firefighters to be able to restore that pension benefit. Along the way, when I started out, you could smoke in the firehouse. You could smoke anywhere. And we pushed very diligently for smoking cessation to be able to strengthen our heart and lung bill. And that was a major battle, I got to tell you, having gone to a lot of union meetings that were smoke-filled rooms, literally, sure, and fire stations. It was a battle to get our members to just go in the bay to smoke, let alone quit smoking.
So the members weren't even really embracing that change, huh?
No, it was extremely difficult. I mean, we had a number of fights on that end where eventually smoking went away. It went from the bunk rooms, out of the fire trucks, into the bay, totally out of the building, and now out of the job altogether.
Wow.
It was a progression of health and safety needs.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. It's crazy to think that you would, that was even ever anything that was happening, right? I mean, like I said, my generation, almost everybody that's probably still in the job today would, that story alone would really impress or surprise them.
Yeah, I think Doug would remember, but there was a famous poster, and we'd have to try to dig it up, of a Fort Lauderdale firefighter smoking a cigarette with his leather helmet on. And it said,
"The most dangerous fire is right underneath your nose."
That's right. That's what it said.
Wow.
That poster became famous, and we hung it in every firehouse in the state of Florida to promote smoking cessation.
Wow. How about that? We'll find it. We'll track that down.
Yeah, it's a great poster.
That was Steve McInerney that put that together.
Yes, he did. He was a huge advocate of ours for health and safety. So I guess some of the other big legislative achievements were also getting the infectious disease bill passed. We had a number of members that were contracting infectious diseases as we progressed into the EMS business. We started cross-training firefighters as EMTs and paramedics, and that was a big push. As you know, that was from Dominic Barbera, our 12th District Vice President, who came from Miami-Dade County, was on the IAFF Executive Board and pushed for a fire-based EMS program, knowing that the fire service was changing and evolving, and for us to keep up with that change and to get ahead of it, we needed to start making ourselves more resourceful. So we started promoting cross-trained firefighter paramedics. And that went along with passing legislation to protect our members from infectious diseases, which
there was even pushback from that. I remember departments in Broward, Davie, as for example, saying we're a fire department. We don't do that rescue stuff.
Right. We put the wet stuff on the red stuff. We're not stretcher fetchers, right?
We had a lot of that. We did. And we still have some of that in the country. But I think if you look overall in the state of Florida, let's just focus on Florida. and look at the wage and benefit comparisons, the departments that have progressed into cross-trained, dual-role fire rescue service with paramedic firefighters are the ones at the top of the food chain. They're the ones that are being more progressive, that make more money, that have better benefits, and that was all a part of it, beside the fact that we're providing a better level of service to the public.
So now that you're the existing 12th District Vice President, give us a little before and after, like when you came in, what was the demographics of the district?
So the demographics of the district was just around 30,000. And I haven't seen the latest number, but the last number I saw a couple months ago, we were topping 35,000 members.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Good growth. And a lot of that's probably happening in the Georgia and where there's a strong push, South Carolina, North Carolina, to grow the local unions.
Yeah. We've had quite a bit of growth in the Carolinas and in Georgia, but we've also been growing in Florida. We've brought on a couple of new locals throughout the state where we've been able to start negotiating contracts for them. We've got a local growing in Central Florida in Highlands County where they merged fire and EMS. We've got locals merging in Okeechobee County. We've got an organizing effort going on in Bay County. So we have a lot of growth and opportunity in our state still to go.
So you're one of 16, right? District vice presidents in the entire IAFF?
That's correct. Yes.
So what is that like? Tell us. I mean, in my tenure, my 20 years, I've seen the IAFF really, really grow. I mean, it's been an incredible amount of evolution. We've become such a, we're providing so many services back into the firehouse and to firefighters. And, it's an association that I'm proud of. I'm proud to be a part of it. I'm proud to see that growth. We've been out in front of so many issues, and for me, it's always been, such an easy thing to talk to new members about and to new departments about coming on board. But I mean, what is that like, from your perspective, working as that DVP? I mean, what are the things the IAFF doing, the things that you're doing that you're the most proud of that are making the biggest change?
Well, let me start by saying that I never thought I would be here as the 12th District Vice President. This is a real honor and a privilege to be elected to represent the members, and I truly appreciate that. It's been a hell of a journey, and our international has grown exponentially. We just topped 320,000 members. And continue to grow, even during this pandemic, even during these unprecedented times, we're growing. But you don't really understand the workings of the international till you get on the inside. And sitting on the board with such esteemed colleagues from all over the country is just amazing, and all over Canada. You learn so much from the other district vice presidents just being in their presence and talking to them.
I bet.
It's an experience.
Sure.
But I would say some of the things that we have done, which are truly amazing, is to continue to add new programs, the growth, the amount of work that's put out. And let's just focus on right now during this pandemic period. Our international headquarters is completely shut down. Yet all of our employees are working from home through Zoom, through email, through telephone calls, and online chats. They're producing the work, doing the budget analysis, the wage comparisons. We've got second to none GIS analysis on your department's potential. Our growth has just been phenomenal in the amount of work that we're putting out. And I think we're going to see more and more new programs coming online as we move into the next 2021.
Do you have any personal passion projects that you're working on right now?
Well, I've been working on this Southern Initiative, which we are going to move into other parts of the country. It's a little different in Canada because they have mandatory affiliation up there, but throughout the United States, where we have voluntary affiliation, we still have a lot of growth opportunity within our country. So this has kind of been an experiment or a work in progress in the South to see how to connect with firefighters in these non-collective bargaining states, in these areas where there's fear and retaliation, and how to grow the union. So we're taking the experience we have and we're going to roll it out to all these other districts. And we're going to start experiencing growth in areas that I don't believe we've ever seen before.
Yeah, I just want to take a minute to say thank you, Walt, for the work that you do, the work that you have continued to do, and the vision you have. I mean, we've known each other for a long time as Florida firefighters. Through that FPF, we've had strong relationships and ties and connections, and we've worked on many things together. But I'm grateful for that to have you there, and you represent our members very well, and you're very effective at what you do, and we're lucky to have you. And I'm proud to grow our district out here in the FPF 8th District in the Panhandle, and you've been a part of a lot of that growth and helping our associations out this way. And so I did want to take a moment on behalf of our 1,000 members out in the Florida Panhandle to say thank you. But it's this is our IAFF. This is It's the President Kennedy's famous speech about, not asking what the country can do for you, but what can you do for the country? And that's what this unionism and this association is all about. It's what can we do? It's not some third party entity or some corporation that we rely on to do the work. It's us doing the work, and it's very bottom up. And I think you help mentor that and promote that attitude, and it's really making an impact. So we're lucky to have you.
Well, thank you, Mike. To Doug's point, I guess passion is to provide the best that we can for the members in good times and in bad times, and we've experienced a lot of bad times in our state, and I'm referring to disaster assistance. So if there's a particular niche or a passion that I've kind of honed in on, is fine-tuning our disaster response during hurricanes and other natural disasters. I don't know if you can hear that. You may want to...
No, this is it's all good.
It's all live. It's good. It's part of it, right?
That's part of the family.
So one of the things that we've done is we've recently stood up what we're calling a GO team. So disaster assistance started years ago by Miami-Dade County out of Hurricane Andrew. And when Hurricane Andrew devastated South Florida, firefighters needed help. They needed supplies and equipment and all kinds of assistance, financially and otherwise. And so we've taken that program to a whole new level. And now we have an IAFF foundation that we raise money for to provide support to our members when they're in need. And we have this GO team. So we have this 4-person team of experienced firefighters who come from different parts of the country with different experience, from California, from Texas, from Ohio, from Florida. And we bring them in to help set up command structure and disaster relief whenever disaster strikes.
Well, I think it's time, Mike, that we introduce Mr. Dix to the lightning round, because right now, you can't shake this guy, but I got a feeling we can shake him a little bit.
Oh, the lightning round is proper. It's in order. And Doug, you lead it out.
Okay, Walt, we're going to ask you questions. It's got to be, you can't. Listen, we don't want to be politically correct, man. We want to see how you operate now. Okay, you're out of the bubble now, brother. Okay, what is something that you've never done but you'd like to do?
Skydiving.
All right, what's your worst sport?
Baseball.
If you could call anyone in the world and have a 1-hour conversation, who would you call?
Wow. Bill Clinton.
What's your favorite book?
Favorite book is Jimmy Buffett, Life After 40.
If you could learn the answer to one question about your future, what would it be?
Will I live to be 100?
Favorite junk food?
That's a tough one. I've got so many favorite junk foods, but I'll have to say coffee cake.
All right. What is something that really annoys you but doesn't bother most people?
Something that annoys me. Say that again.
What is something that really annoys
He's
you?
buying time.
I know. I get it.
He's buying
but
time.
Doesn't bother most people. He's probably Googling it.
I guess not listening.
All right, last one. Florida State Seminoles or the University of Florida Gators?
Jacksonville Dolphins.
Well done. All right, he survived. Good job, Walt. Good job, Brother Walt.
He is a trained professional, man.
Well, Brother Walt, is there anything else you want to add before we put the tray tables up and the seats back in the upright position?
No, I just want to thank you guys for having me along. This is a great forum. It's a great opportunity. I'd love to come back and, experience it again sometime. Maybe I could do the lightning round on you guys.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, I think that would be really good.
Hey, Doug, before we wrap, I do want to have Walt talk about a little bit of technology and what's going on with, what you've introduced and what you enjoy about using technology as a leader.
Well, I've tried to find every way that we can to communicate with our members. And in this unprecedented time that we're in, we've really become accustomed to using Zoom format for video chats with everybody. In fact, our IAFF Executive Board has already had 3 IAFF Executive Board meetings on Zoom. And so we're doing district Zoom coming up this week, where I'm going to have all the district affiliate leaders Zoom in, and we're going to provide them with education. We do regular district meetings on Zoom, email, social media. You can find me on Twitter at Walter IFF or 12DVP. So any of those social media platforms, I embrace that, because that's our new generation on how we're going to communicate with everybody.
Sure. You're doing a great job with it. Keep it up. All right, Doug, I'm going to send it over to you for closing it down.
Yeah. Well, Walt, great interview. Love you like a brother. Long time listener of your wisdom. I
Yes,
can say
sir.
that for a fact.
I second that.
Thanks for listening in, folks. Remember to subscribe to our podcast and subscribe to YouTube or Twitter. You can find us at Doug and Mike Show. And a special thanks to our sponsor, Chief Miller.